Hi everyone and welcome to Total Education with Neil. I'm really excited for my television broadcast audience to get the whole experience of LA. I just have to get my producer out in LA to make sure that BPTV ends up getting all the footage. It was a tremendous experience. I got to really do television for more than just once a month. And we're going to be working with the Andy Russell Foundation, and that's going to be television as well, with some of the great NFL greats and others coming up in May. So I guess even though Dave, I promised him, I said to Dave, the producer at Bethel Park, there's a possibility we're going to have more than an hour programming a month. Well, it just ends up that on location those possibilities will happen. But I'm really excited now. I have another co-host. Jen Forsyth was not able to make it due to some family issues, but somebody that we all know and love if you are a fan of the Total Education Network in general. I have Jarrett here, and I'm so excited. Jarrett, how are you, man?
Neil, I'm doing wonderfully, and I'm so glad to be a part of the show. And I know I've been we've provided so many interesting things and information to our audience on our radio side. I can't wait to share with our audience what we have in store for them today.
Exactly, and it's kind of funny that we are doing segments every week on 1080. Now make sure you write this down if you're in the Pittsburgh area. 1080 a.m. on Thursdays at 3 o'clock, the Total Tutor Show. Jarrett and I will do segments. We'll interview celebrities. We'll interview and we'll talk about different education tips. You got to go check it out. And sometimes he'll make an appearance to WRCT 88.3, which is on Fridays at 4:30. So those are two. So now, but Jarrett, you always said you had a face for radio, just like I said the same thing, and now we're in the television whole deal. So let's go specifically right now to our topic today is all about your son. So we're going to go through the adoption process. We're going to learn more about the adoption, your child's diagnosis, the challenges, and then how we can help you. So let's go specifically to the story about the adoption.
Well, that story really begins, long before we actually started the adoption process, and I changed careers from being a school teacher to being an early intervention behavioral therapist. During that time, those first 2 years that I was working in that field, I began to work with a lot of children that had been adopted. And my wife and I began to really discuss the process of adoption and what we could do. And so we hooked up with an adoption agency, became connected with an adoption agency, and began going through the process. And that's when things started to take a turn in a totally different direction. We were matched with a little guy, 18 months of age. Initially, my wife and I, we were really hoping for an infant. And anyone in our listening, our audience may know that the adoption process can take a pretty long time.
Yes.
You have 2 years to actually, from the start of the adoption process, to adopt. And then if you don't adopt within those 2 years, you have to start all over again. So we were at about a year into the adoption process. We had a couple close calls where we had been asked to visit a prospective birth mother, and they made choices of deciding to parent, and we ended up being matched with a little guy, 18 months of age, right over in Beaver County, of all places. We were willing to travel all over the nation to adopt, and it turned out too that this little guy was in foster care. And that's another whole different process, again, for our audience that is tuning in. Becoming a registered adoptive parent, and then having to go into the foster care system required even more certifications. So we were very willing to do that. We met this little guy. He was living with a foster family, and we met him the very first time back in February of 2008. So it's been a little while, and immediately we were in love with him. He was just such an amazing little guy, blonde hair, blue eyes, and just a wonderful little boy filled with energy. And from that point, it took a year for the adoption to be finalized. I'd like to share with our audience that we have what we call an open adoption, and that means that he sees his birth mother regularly. Okay. Once a month, at least once a month, we take him out to where she lives, and he has an opportunity to spend time with her. So he sees her regularly. He's 6 years of age now, and he knows that he's adopted. He's known right from the beginning, and he refers to his birth mother as Mama, and me as Daddy, and my wife as Mommy. So I think he really understands the whole process, and we're actually thrilled that we have an open adoption.
Right. A lot of questions, and for our audience, because I know the story, but some people don't know the story, we have to kind of step back in a second, because again, the difference between radio and television, you got an hour to talk to me compared to 14 minutes where I shut you down so quick. Okay, 13 minutes are up, but it's all about the situation. So to go through two processes, adoption and also foster care, two systems in the United States that are not the easiest systems to work through. Lots of sadness happens. Lots of people get hurt in both options. And that it had to have been a stressful time before even adopting Davey.
Absolutely, and again, you heard me mention earlier, and our audience heard me mention that we had traveled to meet some prospective adoptive parents that were choosing to place their child in adoptive care, and what happened is that they had their baby and they decided to parent. And the terms that we use are very important, as opposed to saying that they gave up their baby or they decided to keep their baby. These terms are very critical to use. Terms such as decided to parent is a much better sounding term.
Yes.
And it's one that's very important to both the prospective adoptive parents and the birth parents, and they do matter. When you are able to rephrase in those kind of situations, it helps you deal with the kind of grief or the pain when it doesn't go the way that you would like for the adoptive parents. Mm-hmm. And so it does help with dealing with the stress, but it was incredibly stressful. We had many people from our adoption agency to the foster agency in Beaver County who visited our homes. Of course, there were background checks. I was certainly used to that because of my field as a teacher and as a therapist. Yeah. We every year we have FBI clearances, state police clearances, local police clearances. So that was not so stressful, but you have a lot of people visiting your home, taking a look at your home, letting you know what is safe, what could be safer. Right. Because when you're placing a child in the protective care of someone, you really do want to make sure that they are as safe as possible.
And thinking about the whole safety process, I think that foster care is so much more of a challenge because I think you had a story, Davey wasn't the first in foster care, correct?
That is correct, and I'm not sure exactly how much of that I can share.
No, you can divulge, but I will. Yes. I remember the story.
Yes.
That basically it is a stressful thing.
Yes.
Because you grow. What happens in foster care, and this is something that I believe our viewers need to make sure that they're educated on and also are talking to politicians and other people involved that foster care is abused, the system in certain ways. And ultimately, sometimes parents get hurt by certain situations where they place them in foster care for a certain reason, and then after you do a tremendous job and you might be the best option, they'll place them with grandparents that maybe aren't the best option, maybe can't provide. So we need to make sure that our foster care system is done in a better way. Jarrett's story usually turns out horribly 98% of the time. And so this is roller coaster ride's going to get us through this hour. And I'm going to tell Jarrett, we're working on our first book, but this is going to be your second book. And because I think that the story is something in a memoir type of going through these things so that other families understand. So the foster care situation, once Davey was in there, you were absolutely, you said, this is exactly what we want, but we knew there's a chance he's going to leave.
And that is correct. We did know that when we made this placement with our son, with Davey, that the likelihood of him staying with us was pretty high. But again, you are absolutely right. Anything could happen. He has grandparents in Tennessee, and at any point, those grandparents could have said, you know, we'd like to parent him. We would like to raise him, and those grandparents would have been that first option. Yeah. Even had Davey been living with us for a year, and he was living with us for a year before he was adopted, before the adoption process was finalized. Again, though, the adoption agency in Beaver County was very thorough. We had a wonderful team in place. Davey's birth mother was also on board with the adoption process, so that was something that she wanted to do, and especially after she had met us, and when we had provided her with the guarantee of an open adoption. Anyone who's adopted in this country knows that an open adoption is not a legally binding document or an agreement. At any point, an adoptive parent could decide to end that open adoption. So she really needed assurances from us. And for our audience, anyone who is looking into adoption, honesty is absolutely the best way to go in this. So if you do make that agreement of an open adoption, you really want to stay with it.
Can they take Davey back?
Absolutely not. Now he is.
Okay.
He has our last name. He is legally ours, and that happened on the very day that he was adopted in Beaver County in front of the judge.
So the open adoption is not the legal adoption.
Right. It's an agreement that you make to stay in contact with the birth parents. That agreement can be something that says that we are going to send photos once a year, or it can be something as thorough as what we have, which is, we're going to bring Davey to see you once a month or every 3 weeks. So those are important agreements to make. And again, with our audience, anyone out there, and I'd be more than happy to speak with anyone personally who is looking into either adoption through foster care, only simply wanting to be a foster parent, or looking into adoption through an adoption agency. Because we mentioned the abuse that is in foster care. The abuse in domestic adoptions is probably even significantly higher.
Right.
The cost is expensive.
Yes. More than another country, right?
Yes, actually significantly more. But the abuses that are there, anytime we're taking something, the positive side about fostering is it's not a commodity. It isn't a commercial enterprise. It is about either strengthening families or protecting children. The adoption process in the United States is commercial. It's a business. People make money from it, and I certainly don't think that is the way to go. But that is the route that our country takes with adoptions, domestic adoptions. But once Davey lived with us for a year, and during that whole process, we were finalizing the paperwork. And yes, for our audience, it does take that long to finalize your adoption process. It can move faster, and certainly it can take much longer. So we adopted Davey nearly a year after he came to live with us on February 14th of 2009, and it was a wonderful Valentine's Day present, and we had all our family was there. Extended family was there. We had the courtroom filled. The judge asks you just basic questions, and then he asked our son a few basic questions at 2.5 years of age, as best he could answer them. But the judge was really having fun with our son. At that point, it was a formality. Right. Everything had been decided. Nothing could have happened that would have changed that circumstance, except the night before. Our water pipes burst in our bathroom, and water came flooding down through our kitchen and into onto our kitchen floor. The ceiling fell down, but that was okay.
All right. So what we're going to do the next segment, we're going to really go into the process. Everything's euphoric. Jarrett's excited. His wife is excited. Davey's excited. Then we find a diagnosis. And that changes a lot of the game plan, where we're going. They were thinking Davey was pretty much an ADHD child until they found out. So when we get back, we're going to learn more about that. And we'll be back in just a moment.
And now, another adventure with Savings Man.
Oh dear, I can't afford that.
Charge it. You can pay it off later.
Not so fast, credit card guy.
Savings Man.
Don't let him entice you, ma'am. Credit card guy can lead you to big trouble. You need a savings plan.
You're right, Savings Man.
Get this ballpark estimate worksheet at choosetosave.org. It will help you get started.
Gee, thanks, Savings Man.
No, thank you.
So visit choosetosave.org and get your ballpark estimate today.
President Roosevelt signs the Bill of Rights.
I've always appreciated the American Legion.
My gratitude to the American Legion.
Thank you all of the American Legion.
Well, we have millions of veterans that are members of our organization.
Thank
you. The American Legion, celebrating a legacy of service to America. Find out more at legion.org.
Back to Total Education with Neil, and I'm enjoying the conversation I'm having with my radio co-host in the television studio, Jarrett, and we're learning about Davey and the tremendous story of an adoption through foster care. But the story changes very quickly, doesn't it? Because you're learning more about the birth parents, and there are a lot of shocking things that you find out about it.
Yeah, and that is correct. When we were in the adoption process, we learned that Davey had a 50% chance of inheriting a disease from his birth parents called NF2. And it has a much longer name, which I will say, but if our audience simply Googles NF2, they will find a significant amount of information. They'll even come across some of the foundations that exist. But this disease itself was only separated from NF1 only 2 decades ago, before genetic testing became as thorough, before we had a complete kind of diagram of DNA. There was no separation of NF1 and NF2, and they are significantly different in how they will affect the life of that person. During the adoption process, the foster agency was completely upfront with us, thoroughly honest with us, and told us about his birth mother's condition, and told us that the history of this disease shows that the child has a 50% chance of inheriting it. If both parents have this disease, then the child has a 100% chance of inheriting. One parent has the disease, and it's 50%. So it was a coin flip for our son, heads or tails. That's the way that we kind of looked at it at the time. The doctors at that time had kind of assured us he showed none of the symptoms. That there's some birthmarks that are called cafe au lait, spots that appear on a child even as early as birth that are characteristics of this disorder. Okay. He had none of those. He had passed all of his hearing tests, eye tests. So they had assured us that as much as they could, that they did not think he had this. For our audience, that wouldn't have mattered to us either way. Had they told us that he had this disease, once we met him, it didn't change anything for us. We moved forward knowing that even though a team of doctors had kind of assured us that he looked okay, we had another team of doctors from Children's Hospital that had said, you're not going to know until you actually have a DNA test, which we did do after our adoption was finalized. Again, not because it would have changed anything for my wife and I. It had to all do with insurance purposes. So anyone who has navigated this system knows that until your child is adopted, there's separate insurances that you need to use. So once the adoption was finalized, we went through with the DNA test. And I think this is an interesting story. I hope our audience finds it too. His pediatrician, who's a wonderful pediatrician, initially saw no reason to go through the DNA test. She said, you'll know when he has it because he'll show symptoms if he has it. And she said, I'm seeing nothing that indicates that he does. This test is unnecessary. And I remember saying to her, well, he does have a 50% chance of having this disease. And she looked at me and said, he has a 50% chance of not having the disease. And I said, yeah, but we're not willing to. I said, we want to know. And there was a lot of reasons for knowing. The team of neurologists and neurosurgeons at Children's Hospital had explained to us that knowing was a much better way of approaching this because we could then seek medical treatments very early that would help us. And as I go on with this story, we'll see the significance of why early recognition and early treatment was so important for us to provide the best treatment options for my son, for our son. This disease unchecked is devastating. It destroys the muscular coordination, it destroys hearing, it destroys vision, and ultimately it will take that person much earlier in life than what would be a normal life expectancy. So for us, meeting this head-on, being proactive was very important. So we had the blood test done, and then you wait 6 weeks.
So the birth parent, they're not going to live that long?
Well, I mean, she's in treatment now. She has had many surgeries. She uses a walker, sometimes a wheelchair, to maneuver. She's profoundly deaf, and she has lost the vision in one eye. She's now 31. But the hearing loss began at 19, shortly after she graduated from high school. And that's when it took several years for the diagnosis to be recognized. At that point, doctors had simply thought headaches or just a genetic reason for it. They really did. It wasn't until they did a thorough MRI of her brain that they were able to discover these tumors. And these tumors don't necessarily show up with your basic CAT scan, basic X-ray. I mean, it needs to be what a kind of a process with an MRI and what is also called an MRSI, which gives you another cross section and goes deeper into the brain and the nerves of the brain.
With treatment, have you learned of adults living a long time with this disease?
Yes, we are very connected to the NF2 community. There's people all over the world who have this disease. It's a very rare disease. 1 out of 30,000 people will get this disease. So it's very rare. It's very new. It was unrecognized again, as I said, until 2 decades ago. When this happened to people earlier, they didn't know what it was. They just know that they didn't live very long. So the disease has been something that has only really kind of had a research opportunities in the last decade. And there's wonderful doctors that are doing tremendous amounts of work, developing surgical treatments, developing pharmaceutical treatments, all with the objective of not necessarily curing the disease, but treating the disease. There's doctors that are looking into gene therapy, who are looking into the DNA and trying to map the DNA to see if something can be done. But again, the idea here is not necessarily to find a cure, but to find treatments. Right now, the main treatment is surgery, and brain surgery is devastating to the patient. Removing the tumors almost always destroys the nerve that those tumors are lying on. And that includes facial nerves, hearing nerves, all of those. So again, when our listeners Google NF2, and the official name of it is neurofibromatosis type 2. And it's completely different than type 1, even though in 1989 they were lumped together. But now that we have developed the karyotypes and the DNA testing to separate those, we have doctors that are doing amazing work. And a little bit later, I will talk about my son's first brain surgery that he had back in September. When we found out about the DNA test was done, I remember I came home from work. My wife was up in my son's bedroom, and she said to me, you know, we need to talk. At that point, I knew, you know, the results had come back, and I knew that we had lost the coin flip, and that our son had the disease.
So when we get back, and again, Jarrett, thank you for sharing this for our audience. This is something that's hard for him. I remember we did a radio interview when he first announced this to people that his son was having surgery, and he was in tears. So I think it's great that Jarrett's out here because he knows his son is going to live a long, healthy life, but he wants other people to be aware of this disease, to understand what's going on with this disease, and how we can find better treatments than just surgery. And it's up to you to get involved. So we'll tell you at the end how you can help donate and be involved in this. We hope to do get a big celebrity to respond. I guess I'm the celebrity recruiter. If you'll find out when you watch the TV show more, Total Education with Neil is going to be going in some big time places. One of the actors I'm going to have on is going to be co-starring with Ben Affleck, and he's a Pittsburgh boy. So you'll get to see these in the next couple months in the summer when I was in LA hobnobbing with the rich and infamous. But basically, Jarrett, again, this is something that it's tough for you. It's tough to share in ways, but you know after you've done some fundraisers and different things, this is what's needed. If you don't share and you hide what's going on, we're not going to know what's going on with Davey. When we get back, I want to ask him also, what are the signs? What warning signs gave you that you really needed to do the DNA testing? Or was it Jarrett being an educator and his wife working in a field that is involving families? Something that made them say, we have to do this, when a lot of families would listen to the pediatrician. You're watching Total Education with Neil. And we don't have the radio as well because you'll get to hear that when you watch another one of our programs. And we'll be back in just a moment. back to Total Education with Neil. And we're not listening, we're watching. So I do make mistakes myself sometimes, and it happens. It is what it is. And that's why you have a great producer like Dave that could take care of those things. And again, thanks to BPTV for giving us this opportunity to really share with Jarrett this NF2. So basically, we've been talking to Jarrett, and Jarrett, you've kind of shared the situation. The DNA testing came back. He had it. Your response, your wife and you, how did you guys feel once you heard this?
Well, certainly my wife handled it much better than I did.
Really? Okay.
Absolutely. Her first response was, now what do we do from here? Where do we go? My first response was to be very angry and kind of, try to come to terms with the unfairness. The unfairness not for my wife and I. We knew that this was a possibility. The unfairness for our son. Anyone who has met our son, and I'm going to share a little bit later a way that our entire audience on BPTV can see the amazing things that my son has done in his very early life at 6 years of age. I have a whole number of YouTube videos of my son skiing, doing ski jumps, riding what is called a flow rider, which is really kind of surfing, boogie boarding, that he has done at an incredibly early age. And that's only a part of what my son has done, accomplished at 6 years of age.
Right.
We have been rock climbing. We bike ride throughout the entire Pittsburgh area. We've ridden our bikes as far as Homestead along the bike trails. And again, for our audience out here in BPTV land, Pittsburgh has wonderful bike trails that you can just see so much of the city and experience Pittsburgh in a completely different way. And those are all things that we have actively sought out for our son. You mentioned earlier about we knew our son had attention deficit hyper disorder,
right.
ADHD. We knew that early on, pretty much the first time we had met him. We also knew the family history and that there was a diagnosis of severe ADHD within his biological family. So we were prepared for that, and I work with many children who, if they don't have that diagnosis now at a young age, they will get it later. But he had much more energy than the typical toddler, and much more impulsiveness than the typical toddler. But anyone who has a child with that knows that there's an incredible amount of joy that comes with a child who has ADHD. They are very free-spirited, risk takers, willing to try many different things, and that partly is due to their impulsiveness.
Yes.
They're not thinking the next step and say, "Wow, this looks like it might be a little bit dangerous."
Right.
Which, people meet my son and they can't believe that he's not biologically connected to me, because these are things that I had done throughout my life, and he is just like he is the perfect match. He and I are the perfect match with all of the wonderful activities that we have done together. And my wife isn't as much as adventurous as we are, as he and I are, but she certainly is a very good sport about allowing us to do all those things. We tent camp at Presque Isle, right in a tent, and ride waves there. I've gone off a little bit, and I hope our audience will not take this as boasting, but in a way it is kind of bragging about my son, because he is just an incredible little guy, and he knows his disorder. He understands the disorder to the best that a 6-year-old can. He has met people who have the severest forms of this disease. I'm not sure that he totally understands that could happen to him. Our goal is that it doesn't happen to him.
Right.
So when we found out about, my wife shared with me, I was very angry. I still have a lot of anger about this, because of the unfairness. 1 out of 30,000, it's not
Not a huge percentage.
Yeah, I mean the odds you have odds of hitting a big jackpot that are higher than that. So there's still anger there. But because he's healthy now, that anger has dissipated. With the anger was a lot of fear.
Yes,
I had seen the worst examples of people with this disorder and disease. So I was very fearful of what could happen to our son. But my wife, that very day, the very next day after we got the report, contacted Children's Hospital, the team of neurologists and geneticists that had been working with us prior to this, and then said to them, okay, now what do we do? And here's what we started that very day, the process of every 6 months our son has a complete MRI, and that includes the MRSI, which gives a thorough cross-section of the brain and the spinal column. That's where in NF2 these tumors almost always develop, was within the brain or the spinal column. So every 6 months we have the MRIs done. Then the neurologist, the neurological team will look at them and they share us the results. The first round of MRIs came back clear, so he had no indicator. So this was about 2.5. Right. Well, actually closer to 3. In August of 2009. His birthday is August 16th. So in August of 2009, we had our first MRI. That came back clear. We were all very happy with that. Life proceeded as normal. We went to the beach. We started skiing. I started my son skiing at 2.5. So the next season, ski season came around. We were already skiing again. In January of the following year, we had our next MRI. That one showed the development of 2 tumors, which the doctors were quite frankly surprised. They did not expect to see any tumors until our son was much older. The general idea, the general thought was these tumors didn't start developing until adolescence, when the body changed, different hormones were released. Now with our son, they're kind of re-examining that. And now they think that the tumors are developing much sooner.
They just didn't have, people weren't diagnosed to that point.
That is actually the key component of this. Almost no one who has this disease knows they have the disease until the symptoms have manifested themselves to enough severity where they go to the doctor. And then it's almost never diagnosed immediately.
I'd like to back us up. And the reason is, I know this is because it's different, this interview for you, because this is your passion. This is something that you've not gotten to share with lots of people, and now you're having this platform to share it. The symptoms for people out there that might be concerned, what are the initial symptoms that Davey was exhibiting that you guys really didn't know?
None.
None.
Yes, and this is the advantage of diagnosing it early. By finding out, by diagnosing
Nothing with ADHD?
Well, no connection between ADHD
really?
and NF2.
None.
That was a connection that was totally part of something else within his biological makeup. For our listeners, if they want to, our audience has a chance to listen to our show, they know we thoroughly highlight ADHD, and we have explained in really kind of a complete scientific way what happens with a child with ADHD. The frontal lobe is underdeveloped, which it is with almost all toddlers, but it's more for a child with ADHD. And our audience who are working with the children that have ADHD, I would tell them, accept the challenges that you have and find the joy that is part of that disorder. So he had none. And that was the positive. That was the good thing. And his team at Children's Hospital said, that's what we want to work with. We want to keep your son from getting any of these symptoms. So what are the symptoms? Hearing loss, minor at first, tinnitus within the ears, so the ringing within the ears, headaches, mobility problems, start to lose your balance. But these characteristics are found in a lot of other
sicknesses or just disorders.
Yeah, yes. Right. ALS is one of those same terrible diseases that has those same characteristics. So those are the things that you would look for when a person is older and they start to experience this vision loss, blurred vision. All of these things are part of the NF2 makeup. The difference is at that point, that usually means the tumor is so significant in size. And when I say significant in size, I mean the size of a golf ball. That
either on the brain,
on the spine, and it's not going to be just one. So now you have multiple tumors that size. The surgery is incredibly damaging. It saves the person's life, but it destroys the tissue, the nerves, the brain area around that tumor, because there's no other option. It has to be removed. And to do that, they have to remove nerves and tissue that are even nearby that tumor. If not, the tumor will simply just regrow.
All right. Cool.
That's one of the other areas of the disease, is that even after removal, the tumor can regrow.
Cool. And I hate to stop you there, but we have to take a break.
Absolutely.
And when we get back, I really want to touch upon the surgery, because Davey did have surgery. He had a wonderful experience with Make-A-Wish that we want to touch upon. And then we want to get our viewers out there all over the world to be able to help the NF2 Foundation and also Davey's fight. We get back. More Total Education with Neil.
Watch BPTV.
Back to Total Education with Neil, and the story, I've learned a lot from Jarrett, listening to him on the radio, sharing, where we probably didn't share that much when we were co-workers, but 15 minutes or at meetings till we became. What's so cool about my radio show, my two best friends, co-hosts Jason the public school guy and Jarrett, who I probably, because of my large family, wouldn't have time to talk to. I get to talk to them every week and learn so much about them that I would never know. The great teacher that Jason is, to the great therapist that Jarrett is, and parents that they both are. So we're continuing with Jarrett on this conversation. They find tumors.
Yep.
Did they say, let's go to surgery right off of that?
No, actually the tumors were small enough that they wanted to simply just monitor the tumors. So that year, that January, the MRI came back showing a tumor growth in the frontal lobe and tumor growth along the auditory nerve. But they were small, a millimeter, less than a millimeter. So they were small enough that they wanted to simply monitor. So we did that for a year and a half, 2 years, no significant change. They had kind of stayed the same. And then back in January of well, not this year, but a year, over a year ago, yes. The MRI came back, showed the one tumor on the auditory nerve had started to grow. They wanted to wait until June to see what so we weren't even waiting 6 months at this point. but it started to grow. They wanted to do an earlier MRI, but give it some time. In June of last year, they did another MRI, and the tumor had grown significantly. It had grown from less than a millimeter to 4 millimeters, the tumor on the auditory nerve. At that point, the neurosurgeons at Children's Hospital were absolutely certain that now this tumor was going to grow rapidly and it needed to be removed. At that stage, the team of doctors had said, because of where the tumor, nothing has been easy or fortunate for my son with this disease. The doctors felt that he wouldn't show any tumor growth until well into his teenage years. He started showing the tumor growth much sooner. Now they think that it is much sooner. In some ways, our son is a science experiment because he's one of the youngest people to be diagnosed with this disease. And they'll see this science experiment in what I'm going to share next. So we prepared ourselves for significant brain surgery. The doctors came back telling us that there was a 50% chance that the hearing would be lost. Oh, wow. That's pretty significant. But if you know my son, we've already started teaching him sign language. We communicate with his mother his birth mother through sign language. So we've already been working with that, knowing that the hearing loss is at some point probably going to happen, regardless of how we manage his disease. But they prepared us to say, 50% chance that the hearing will be destroyed. But again, if you know my son, if you had to lose something in life, hearing would probably be one of the things that he would accept much better than his mobility, his athletic grace. And when people have a chance, our audience has a chance to visit YouTube, they will see some wonderful examples of my son's athletic grace. And I definitely want to get that YouTube address out there for them to see.
It will end up on the page. I know that our producer will put that up so that people can check that out.
So, that was the news we didn't want to hear, but we were accepting of it. Well, a month later, after the team of neurosurgeons looked at it again, and just an absolutely wonderful group of doctors at Presbyterian Hospital and Children's Hospital. We're fortunate that we have such great hospitals within our community. They came back and said, we can't do the surgery. And their response was they can't do the surgery because there was a 100% chance that he would lose his hearing. Yes. At that point, it became unacceptable for us because that tumor was growing rapidly, and it was going to need to be removed in a year, 2 years, maybe 3 years, and the hearing would be lost then. And our concern was anyone who has experienced this knows that the vestibular nerve, the balance nerve, our motor nerves, lie right along with the auditory nerves. I was unwilling and could not accept that we'd wait and take the chance of having my son lose his grace, his wonderful talents, his gifts that he has inherited, the things that he inherited that have been challenging, but what he inherited from his birth parents that are simply amazing. I was unwilling to do that, and knowing my son, he would be unwilling. But I understood the neurosurgeon's perspective. They would do more harm than good by removing this tumor, and they couldn't do that. So we began to look at other options, and the option that we chose and saw was an option called gamma knife, gamma knife procedure, which is pinpointed radiation. Our team of our team of neurosurgeons at Children's were not exactly thrilled of this idea because they did not like the idea of radiation treatments on such a young child. The doctor that we had at Presbyterian, who again was in constant communication with the neurosurgeons at Children's Hospital, he felt that that was the best direction to go. And he looked at us during a consult with all of the other doctors there and said, this is really your only option for him. We know what happens with conventional brain surgery. The hearing is gone. Perhaps the vestibular nerve is damaged. he said this gives us our best option to either destroy the tumor or at least minimize the effects of the tumor. So we went forward with that, and that surgery was done in September. He went home the same day. He was expected. He went home the same day with a large head wrap on. He was expected to be admitted at least one day, but he could not stay in bed. Okay. And the neurosurgeon came in and said, you might as well take him home. I think he'll do more damage to himself here at the hospital than he will at home. So we took him home. He was at school 2 days later with bandages on his head. All the children wanted to ask, what was going on, what happened. We had our best checkup so we had an MRI done in January of this year. The tumor had not grown at all. Oh my. So the tumor had stayed the same size, which is really one of the best case scenarios. The only way it would have been better is if the tumor would have shrunk. But the fact that the tumor did not grow most likely means that the tumor is dead. It'll still be there, but that's okay, because it can no longer grow on the nerve and do any more damage. So the doctor was so thrilled, in fact, of the results. He said, I think we could go to yearly MRIs. And I'll share with our audience, my wife and I looked at each other and we said, no, I think we need to stay with 6 month
that's
MRIs.
Good.
But the important thing is the doctor was so thrilled with the results. That's why he was suggesting yearly MRIs.
The story could be a lot longer than 1 hour. And it could be a documentary in itself. And I do know film producers and directors that could get this done. But right now, Jarrett needs to share some important things. We can't talk about Make-A-Wish, but it was a tremendous thing. And you got to check out the podcast of our discussion on that. But big things. First of all, how they can watch the YouTube videos and also help with NF2. Then I have one more question after that. So basically, where can our viewing audience find out more information on NF2 and donate to the foundation and see some of the videos YouTube of your son?
Well, Neil, you have actually been very helpful in attempting to connect us with celebrities. We had our first fundraiser at Hidden Valley Ski Resort this past winter, where we raised a significant amount of money by selling bracelets and Subway discount cards, and we sent that check into the NF2. So families, our audience that is interested in finding out ways that they can contribute to finding treatments for NF2. It's called the NF2 Northeast Inc. Foundation, or they can simply do a Google search of NF2 and they will certainly come across. That'll be one of the first links that they see when they do that Google search. The YouTube page I have is 412 Jarrett, my first name, Jarrett 3863. That's where they can find the videos of my son on YouTube doing his ski race, his ski jumping, his riding a boogie board on a flow rider, just some of the most amazing things. And that's only a portion. I have many movies of my son doing wonderful things. So much of that was part of the Make-A-Wish Foundation that sent us to Disney World. And it was so much more than Disney World. We went indoor skydiving. Oh, that video is on YouTube. Our audience must check out that video, the indoor skydiving video. What an amazing group, an amazing instructor that he had. It was just a wonderful experience. I did it too, but my son had a wonderful time doing it.
So the last question I have is, where are we going from here? So they basically continue the MRIs and the method that you use instead of brain surgery. Can that be done over and over again?
Gamma knife is still considered brain surgery because it is going into the brain. There are small incisions.
They're not taking
No, they are not removing anything. And right now, that is going to look like our best treatment option because that it doesn't damage the brain as much as the conventional brain surgery will do. So right now we are happy with that option, and we are going forward with that option. The team at Children's Hospital is totally on board with this. They recognize that conventional brain surgery is really not the best option for our son. There may be some tumors that develop that we might have to explore that. But for instance, for our audience, any tumor that develops along the facial nerve, to remove that surgically will destroy the facial nerve, and that causes paralysis. Okay. So that is definitely going to be something, a gamma knife procedure will definitely be something that we will explore because the MRI did show that there was the formation of a tumor beginning on the facial nerve.
Well, definitely thanks for coming by.
Glad to do it, and glad to
I'm so excited that you're my co-host now, and you and Jen Forsyth will be here next month. And then you guys will get to see the television show much, much more. My website's really quickly, totaltutor.net. Twitter, Total Tutor. You'll see me interacting with different celebrities. Neil S. Haley, Facebook. Message me on Facebook. I'll friend request me. Twitter, you can go out and tweet me out. And go to the website and email me at nhaley@totaltutor.org. Total Education with Neil. We educate you in many different things. And that's why, as a teacher, I enjoy interviewing all these fantastic people. So take care, and we'll see each other soon. Good day, everyone.
I'm Greg Poge, and this is A Plan.
And I'm Mike Shaheen, also known as Bill Cosby.
BPTV is in desperate need of volunteers, new TV shows, and even your own short films.
Like on YouTube.
For example, you can send your own YouTube videos, and we will gladly put them on the air.
Right, because I just said that like 3 seconds ago.
We can show you all the tools you need to create your own TV show.
Like Photoshop, Final Cut, or After Effects.
A lot of the equipment we have at BPTV is the same equipment used by professionals in your favorite TV programming.
Shows such as Scrubs or Mythbusters.
We'll even take you step by step through the creation of your own show. Plus, you get to meet a bunch of fun people who enjoy doing the same thing, like us.
Yeah.
We really need some new material for BPTV.
Yeah.
I mean, the only people working are me and this plan.
Yeah. Wait, what?
That's right, just me and this plan.
Greg, I'm right here.
It's really hard to come up with ideas whenever we just have me and this plan here.
Greg, we're filming a video right now. I mean, we sat here for an hour writing this script out. Can the camera even see me?
Like
Hello?
I said, come to BPTV and help me and this plan make some good television. Because clearly, no one else is here.
Greg, I'm right here. Hello? Oh, come on.
I've always appreciated the American Legion.
My gratitude to the American Legion.
Thank you all of the American Legion.
We have millions of veterans that are members of our organization.
Thank you.
The American Legion, celebrating a legacy of service to America. Find out more at legion.org.
My name is Amanda. I'm 21 years old. I have lots of friends that use tanning beds that lay out in the sun all the time, and I tell them about Jamie. Jamie was in her early 20s when she was diagnosed with melanoma, and she died right before she turned 30. People think tanning is safe. I don't think it's safe. You could die just like Jamie did.
This message is brought to you by the American Academy of Dermatology.